started. We'll give it a minute for people to join.
Yeah, John just messaged me. Actually, he's having some technical difficulties, but he's en route digitally.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Thanks for tuning in. We'll just give it a minute to let others who registered join us. But thank you for joining this afternoon panel about the econ major within the joint degree program. Okay, great. Well, we'll just go ahead and get started, and those who register can, of course, join as we go through the panel. So just how this will work is we'll just introduce ourselves, and then we'll open it up to a Q&A from you all that are tuning in. Hi, John. Hi. And just as a brief introduction, my name is Caroline Ward. I'm an assistant dean with the Office of Undergraduate Admission. And if you have any admission-related questions, I'm happy to answer those. But I will go ahead and pass it on to our panelist, Aubrey, to introduce herself and John as well. And then we'll get going on the Q&A.
Okay. Hey, everyone. My name is Aubrey George. I'm a fourth-year economics student in the program. Fourth year means senior. I'm from Colorado Springs, Colorado. And the way that I went through the program is I started at William & Mary. I spent the next 2 years at St. Andrews, and I'm back at William & Mary for this semester. So it's called ABBA is how I went about it. I'll go to John.
Yeah, my name is John. I'm also a senior in the joint degree program studying economics. I sort of did the opposite of Aubrey. I started at St. Andrews for my freshman year, and then I did sophomore year at William & Mary, back to St. Andrews for my junior year. And I'm finishing up at William & Mary this year.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, those tuning in, please feel free to drop your questions in Q&A. Always happy to answer those. And just to get us started, I have a question, and that is, how did you choose your track, going about it? Because I know you kind of have that choice between ABBA or ABAB. How did you go about choosing your track?
I'll go first. Sorry. Yeah. So there were a couple of things that factored into my decision to do the ABBA starting at William & Mary. I think as far as my career goes, I knew that I wanted to work in the United States after I graduated. And so it's a lot easier to apply for jobs, but also to apply to American graduate schools. If you're spending your fourth year in the US, you don't have to deal with time zones when you're interviewing, and you have more access to visit other schools if you're looking at graduate school, or to do a visit of an office of a place you might be applying for a job. And so that was the career reason that I decided I wanted to do my final year at William & Mary, meaning I did my 2 middle years in St. Andrews. And I think the other important thing for my decision was just socially. The programs, it's a little taxing because you have to make a lot of friends. And it's great for that reason, but I wanted a little bit of consistency in the middle of it, where I knew that I was going to be able to maintain a social circle for 2 years at least. And it was also kind of easier logistically to keep housing and all of my things over at St. Andrews for a block of time versus going back and forth. Yeah, so that's me. I'll let John do the opposite.
Yeah, I had a similar reason to Aubrey. I'm sort of the career I was interested in, and I'm also going to grad school next year. And so just sort of navigating that and interviewing for jobs is a lot easier when you're in the US, if you're trying to target jobs in the US, just because like time zone's a big thing, like international phone calls can be expensive. And so you just sort of have to think about those things if you're trying to target jobs in the United States from St. Andrews. Another thing, so my cohort, sort of the people that I was with freshman year at St. Andrews and then sophomore year at William & Mary, we all sort of decided as a group that we wanted to go back to St. Andrews for our junior year. And so like part of what Aubrey was saying about the social reasons, like it is nice to sort of have a consistent group of friends that you're with all 4 years, even though you're switching between 2 universities. And so I really value, maintaining those friendships for my last 2 years in the program.
Great, thank you both. And as an economics major, can you both share what your first year curriculum was like within the joint degree program and as an econ major?
Yeah, my first year at St. Andrews. So St. Andrews, Econ and William and Mary Econ is a little bit different in how they teach the first 2 years. And so I felt like I took macro my first semester at St. Andrews and then micro my second semester at St. Andrews. And it's pretty advanced. Like they have two different tracks. They sort of have an accelerated track if you took AP Econ in high school, and a more regular track if you took if you're kind of new to econ. And then coming to William and Mary for my sophomore year and doing intermediate here, I found intermediate was a very easy transition just because St. Andrews was pretty all encompassing in their approach. Like when you're at St. Andrews, you only really take econ classes. That's sort of how the UK approaches education. And so I felt like I was way ahead of William and Mary students coming in the second year. And I think Aubrey can talk about sort of the opposite of that from her perspective.
Yeah, so starting with economics at William and Mary, you'll have to take the principles of micro and the principles of macro, which is your 101 and 102 classes, regardless of if you've taken AP Econ in high school or not. And so for me, I had taken AP economics, and so it was pretty much just a repeat of what I had learned in high school for those first two classes. But that's just one of the ways that the program works in assigning credits, is that you aren't going to be able to get out of what you took APs for. Another thing of note for your first year at William and Mary as an economics major is that those two econ classes that I mentioned are the only ones that are required of you for the economics major. So that means that you have about 4 classes per semester that you can use as your electives to try and take other classes that can fulfill other requirements. They're called, I think, knowledge objectives. They changed the name a lot. It might be breadth requirements now, but that's stuff like taking a philosophy or a religion class, those things that the liberal arts of William and Mary is trying to push you to go beyond your major. And so you do have a lot of room your freshman year at William and Mary to take classes other than econ. I'll also speak to a little bit about what John said about the differences in economics between William and Mary and St. Andrews. And so starting at William and Mary, the way they teach economics is that there are loads of different professors who are teaching these classes at the same time. So you could be in Econ 101 and your friend could be in Econ 101, and you take them at different times with different professors. And so you might not be learning exactly the same thing as your classmate in the other class. At St. Andrews, everyone will take those core principles of economics classes together. So they are all learning the exact same thing. And so all of the students who are in their second year at St. Andrews are expected to have the same economics background. So coming in as a student from William and Mary, not only do you not really share the economics background with the students from St. Andrews, but also the other students coming over from William and Mary, you could have had a bit of a different education. And so you do have to put in a little extra work, but it's totally manageable.
Thank you. And then we have a question asking, were either of you able to get a minor with the econ major?
I would have been able to. Econ, in terms of the different degrees in the joint degree program, econ probably has the lower amount of like required classes. Like IR has to take history, IR has to take government and econ, and so there's sort of a ton of requirements in just terms of different curriculums that you have to take as an IR major. But as an econ major, it's a pretty straightforward path to graduation. Like we just have a certain number of 300 and 400 level classes really that we have to take, along with some required math classes that we have to take. And so you can definitely minor as an econ major, I think, pretty easily. I didn't, just because I didn't have enough credits in any other discipline. Because you sort of have to get all of those credits at William and Mary. Because if you're at St. Andrews, like junior year at St. Andrews, you're only taking econ classes. I took 6 econ classes my junior year. And so if you're trying to minor in government or psychology, you have to be able to get all those credits at William and Mary. And so you have to make a decision pretty early on in your William and Mary curriculum.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit onto that. I also did not pursue a major, or sorry, I did pursue a major. I didn't pursue a minor. And that is pretty much because of what John said. while you're at St. Andrews, you're only going to be taking the economics classes and then the required maths classes for econ. If you are trying to do a minor in a subject outside of that, you have to take those classes at William and Mary. I was trying to be a music minor for my freshman year, and I ended up not being able to continue along that track just because of the way that my course schedule worked out is I could not go to the class at that time. And because I couldn't go to the introductory class at that time, when I came back 2 years later, I didn't have the introduction class to do any of the other intermediate classes. And so you do have to be aware and put in the work and the logistics, but it can be done. There are people who get minors.
Yeah, I know a girl who's an econ major, graduated last year, was a French minor, and it really just required her taking an extra French class every semester. So she sort of had to overcredit every semester by one class, which is it can be a lot of work. So it is like a little bit difficult to minor in the program, but it's definitely doable.
Yeah, but I'd actually, heard that information that you just have to like really let your advisor know early on so that they can basically map out how you would be taking those classes and making sure it is doable from the get-go.
It's not a decision you can make your senior year of William and Mary of, oh, I maybe can minor, and like you have to make the decision like then take enough class credits and really structure it like ahead of time. So if you know you're going to minor, get on it early.
Great point. Great point. And then can you each share what you're involved in extracurricularly at each university? Because we always get questions about, do I have time for a social life in the joint degree program? Am I able to join any clubs or organizations? So can you both speak about that?
Yeah, so I was sort of involved in two very different things at both universities, which is kind of a cool part of the program. Is you can sort of like when I'm in the UK, I can do things like I was a part of the Breakaway Society in St. Andrews, and it's this sort of like hill walking hiking society. Aubrey's also in it. And so just while I was in Scotland, I really wanted to sort of hike the Highlands, and there are a lot of mountains in Scotland. And so this sort of extracurricular club gave me the opportunity to really just sort of travel on certain weekends. And sometimes it'd just be a day trip, sometimes it'd be a weekend trip. And so that was just a hiking society at St. Andrews that I was really involved with. I was also at St. Andrews involved with the investment society. I'm sort of, despite being an econ major, I am sort of going a finance career path. And so because of that, like I needed to join like an investment club. I felt like to really balance, just so I could be prepared to enter the job market. One other thing I was involved with at St. Andrews, I was actually a tour guide. So I gave tours at the universities on visiting days. And so that was really out of my comfort zone, but I really grew to enjoy it. And then at William and Mary, I rode crew. So that was sort of like a very different transition where I wasn't rowing crew at St. Andrews, but when I come to William and Mary, I was practicing 15 hours a week for the rowing team here.
Yeah, I also had a similar experience of being involved in very different societies and clubs across the two different schools. While I've been at William and Mary, I tend to involve myself more in sports. And so I'm on the club lacrosse team here. My freshman year, I played club Quidditch. I no longer play club Quidditch, but I loved every second of it. And I also loved doing the intramural sports that were offered at William and Mary. I would say when I went over to St. Andrews, I actually, I kind of tried to do these same activities at first. They have a lot of the same offerings. So they had a lacrosse team, and they had what are called hall sports, which is just when you do intramural sports, but with your dorm as your team. And so I was involved in that for a little bit, but I wanted to make sure that I did have, different experiences at the different universities. And so I got really involved with a music society at St. Andrews called the Folk and Traditional Music Society. And I ended up being on their committee there. And so that's really what I put a lot of my time into, was just that one society there and putting most of my effort there. And then this year back at William and Mary, I am the head peer advisor, and all my time goes towards the club of the joint degree program.
Nice. And John, you mentioned that you're planning to go into the finance kind of career track. Can you both share how the econ major within the joint degree program has prepared you for after college. And that can have to do with career services, your advisors, your own, research, anything like that.
Yeah, so I really knew that I wanted to go. I had some really good summer internships that I was initially looking for like econ research roles because I do love really grew to love economics as a subject. I came in liking economics, but I feel like I've appreciated it even more now. And so initially when I was like freshman, sophomore, I was looking for like sort of econ research and like maybe helping professor roles. And I sort of got a job with a private equity firm, and then I realized that, oh, finance is more of a route that I wanted to go. But econ definitely gives probably the best foundation out of any degree. I am biased, but I think it gives a very flexible degree sort of foundation where you can go into finance, you can go into research or consulting, or you can, whereas I feel like some other degrees are a bit more limited in where you can go. So like when I'm applying to jobs, there's tons of jobs that say like you must be like a finance or an econ major. And I would say in terms of the jobs I'm applying to, there's very few jobs that would have like let me be an IR major if I didn't have like the math requirements and sort of the economic analysis mindset that econ has really given me.
Yeah, I think that especially in the program, you gain a lot of skills in economics that you um, wouldn't get at either university separately. And so that's one of the things that you can really push as you're going off into graduate school or looking for a job, is just how you have been able to sort of adapt between the different teaching styles and the different ways that economics is understood at the different universities. And so I think that's something that I really liked a lot, especially at St. Andrews, was they taught economics very mathematically. And so whereas William and Mary will teach econ very much focused on sort of the intuition and the graphs, at St. Andrews, you were looking at the mathematical proofs behind the different theories. And so I now have experience with both of those understandings of economics, and I put that in every single cover letter that I write. I put it in every I was applying to graduate school for a while, and I put that in my graduate school applications. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I entered college 4 years ago. And I actually started as an IR major and switched into economics 2 years after that. And so I would say that my experience with economics in the program has been an experience of seeing how I could take economics and apply it to loads of different careers, because every 3 months you would ask me what I wanted to do after college, and it would be a different answer. It would be law school, it would be graduate school, it would be consulting. So all of those things that John mentioned, it's something you can do with economics, and I was never in a certain path of this is what I'm going to do. I have a job with the Federal Reserve Bank and as a research associate. And I definitely think that economics in the program was able to get me to that position just because of how deeply you will understand economics after your 4 years. And then the research opportunities that you'll have at both schools. I was a Monroe Scholar at William and Mary, and a Laidlaw Scholar at St. Andrews, which is another type of independent research. And so combining those two opportunities really set me up to do a research career.
You have double the professors in the program basically that you can reach out to and you can help with research. And so I definitely, looking back, I wish I utilized that more. But that's definitely something you should think about, is the number of econ professors that you have access to is literally doubled.
That's a great point. Great point. And it looks like we had some questions come in. So for the first question, did you find out that you were able to keep friendships with people outside of the joint degree program? So people not in your cohort, were you able to become friends with them?
I found absolutely. I had more, because I started at St. Andrews, I would say I have more friends that are not in the program at St. Andrews. And so, but I was definitely able to maintain those friendships. Part of it was just through like Snapchat and texting, and just sort of when I was over at William and Mary, just sort of keeping up with them. And then when I came back to St. Andrews for my junior year, I felt like like I didn't really skip a beat. Like I was able to like go kind of right back into those friendships. And it wasn't like I didn't feel like we'd grown apart or anything like that. And I still have tons of friends from St. Andrews that I still keep in touch with daily. And so I definitely didn't struggle to maintain friendships. I can't say that everybody experienced the same thing. There are just people do grow apart, but I felt like I was really able to maintain my friendships at St. Andrews.
Yeah, I think I felt a lot of anxiety in my time in the program, worrying about, what's going to happen when I come back to William and Mary. I've been gone for 2 years. And so for a bit, I put a lot of effort into trying to stay in contact with my friends at William and Mary, Snapchat, texting, FaceTiming. And I think that was great and obviously really beneficial. But at the same time, like John said, you get back and it's like you haven't missed a beat. It's those people who are your friends, they're your friends, and it doesn't take that much work to maintain those relationships. As far as St. Andrews goes, the time difference when you're across the Atlantic makes it a little bit difficult. But yeah, I still call my friends who are just St. Andrews students and we'll chat for 3 hours or so at a time on FaceTime. So it's not international call fees. No, not really any trouble at all maintaining friends outside the program.
And I will say, St. Andrews especially is so international that I kind of look around. I can look at a map of the world and I can like have friends in so many different places around the world. And so I was in New York 2 summers ago, and I just could reach out to like 6 or 7 friends from St. Andrews that were all from New York, and I was able to do the same when I visited London. And I met up with a friend in Paris once, just with my dad. I was like in Paris over winter break for a little bit. And I was like, I have some friends that are French who are in Paris. And so it's definitely one of those things where it's really cool to just be able to be places. And I definitely always felt comfortable being able to reach out to friends who are really just from all over the world. And that's such a cool and unique opportunity.
That's great. And then we have a question asking, did you have time or were you able to pursue a part-time job? And are part-time jobs even available at both schools?
Yes, I did not pursue a part-time job, but I definitely had the time to pursue a part-time job if I needed to. At St. Andrews, with a student visa, you are allowed to work, I think 20 hours a week. So you can definitely do a part-time job at St. Andrews as long as you keep it under it's a visa rule. Since you don't have a work visa, you have a student visa, you can only max work 20 hours. But I definitely had friends at St. Andrews who worked like jobs at different shops around town. And I have friends here who work jobs at different restaurants. And so you definitely have the time and the ability to pursue a job if you need or want to.
Yeah, I'll just add a little onto that. St. Andrews is full of coffee shops and pubs and restaurants, and they're always looking to hire students. And so if you want a part-time job, you can pretty much get hired. I tried to work at an ice cream store over the summer when I was in St. Andrews, and they didn't hire me, but that's only because I wasn't going to be there for the amount of time they wanted me. But you can definitely work under your visa. You'll have the time to do it. Like as John said, I have loads of friends who did it. I have a part-time job right now with the university, and it's very manageable.
Great. And within the joint degree program, so John, you mentioned some traveling. Some people do ask, do joint degree program students travel on their weekends, on breaks, during the summers? I know for those tuning in, I'm sure you guys know that joint degree program students can certainly do a William and Mary study abroad program during the summertime. So another study abroad program on top of the joint degree. But Aubrey and John, are you guys able to just travel on the weekend? Or I know COVID may have impacted that quite a bit this past year, but before it?
I've been able to travel internationally during the semester actually at both schools. So freshman year, it's pretty much reserved to breaks, I would say, most of the time, just because you are in class and you do have work to do. And so like freshman year, I was able to go to Prague with some friends over my spring break. Sophomore year, I went to Iceland over spring break. And in junior year, it was kind of cut short with COVID, but I was able to take a weekend and actually fly to Munich to attend Oktoberfest with some friends. And so you definitely have you definitely have breaks to do trips. That's probably that's the easiest time probably to do trips. But for when I went to Oktoberfest, I was able to just sort of like, I didn't have class on Friday and didn't have class on Monday, so I was able to sort of take an extended weekend and fly to Munich with some friends.
Yeah, you do have less classes at St. Andrews than you do at William and Mary, so you're more likely to have a Monday where you don't have any obligations or a Friday where you don't have any obligations, and you can take those as 3-day weekends. I spent my first year that I was at St. Andrews, so my sophomore year, and I traveled so many places in Europe. I'll try to name off a few. I went to Italy, Portugal, Spain, Hungary, and Austria, I think, in my second year there. In my third year at St. Andrews, I realized, wow, I've been able to travel all over Europe. This has been incredible, but I'm in Scotland right now, so I should probably do some like Scotland things. And so most of my trips for when I was a junior were around Scotland. I went on the breakaway trips, hiking off in the Highlands. I went to the Orkney Islands, which are really far north in Scotland. No one goes there, but they have some really cool like rock, like Stonehenge features and lots of cool Viking history. So I got to experience that. Were COVID not to have happened, I was going to hike the West Highland Way. So even if you don't want to go all over Europe, within Scotland, there are so many things you can explore. I also went to London and the Peak District in England a couple times.
Those trips all sound fantastic for sure. And then this is always a very common question, but I like to pose it to every joint degree program student. Why did you choose the joint degree program?
I'll take this one. The reason that I chose the joint degree program was kind of a mistake at first. I wasn't sure what I had applied to on the Common App. I just checked the box to apply to the program. I was just set on going to William and Mary. And then obviously you had to write an essay, so I had to figure out what the heck this thing was that I was applying to. And I think for me, it was a lot about adventure, and it was a lot about independence and trying to figure out, how I could go off and make my own way at college, at 2 different colleges internationally. Also, it was just the breadth of experiences that I thought I would be able to get, learning the academics from 2 different institutions and really seeing how they do, teaching. I was interested in being, as I said at the beginning, I've had so many different career plans. And so when I started college, I wanted to be a professor. And so I was very interested in like getting experience in academia in both the United States and the UK. And so this was a great opportunity for that.
Yeah, mine was kind of similar to Aubrey's, where I was applying to St. Andrews and I was fully intending to go to St. Andrews full time. I had grown up in pretty much the same sort of small town my entire life, and it was just one of those kids who was like, I had friends going to like local colleges or the colleges that are like 2 or 3 hours away, and I just wanted to be 18 hours away. It was sort of my mentality. So it takes me a while to get to St. Andrews. But I really wanted that international experience. I was looking at other like English schools. So I was looking at Durham, I was looking at LSE, I was looking at St. Andrews. I really just I knew I kind of wanted to be in the UK and to just have a very wildly different experience. And so when I was applying to St. Andrews, I sort of did the same thing as Aubrey, whereas I just like checked this box in the Common App. And we didn't even have to do an essay for applying to St. Andrews. And so then when I got into St. Andrews, they also said, you're also in on this program. And so then I did more research into the program. And there were things that I liked about it. I liked that I could sort of have parts of like an American college experience that I didn't think I was going to get. Like St. Andrews doesn't have like an American football team. They don't have, fraternities. Not that I rushed Greek life here, but there was just sort of like certain things that when I associated with college that I was wondering, like, am I going to miss out on these opportunities if I just spend my 4 years in Scotland. And so I liked that this program sort of balanced. I did get this international experience that I really, really wanted, and I really got out of my comfort zone there. But at the same time, I was able to take a bunch of liberal arts classes. I was able to, go to a football game and go to frat parties and sort of have that experience too that I'd always heard about.
Awesome. And then one question that I'd like to ask you both is, what advice would you give to these students that are deciding, between the joint degree program and all these other amazing schools, or even the advice for students that have already decided to do the joint degree program and going into the econ major?
Well, if you're deciding between the program and maybe just going to William Mary or just going to another school, like my mentality is like there's a very pretty small window in most people's lives where they're really able to travel internationally and really experience a different culture that's not just like a 1 week or 2 week trip. And so looking back, I think I've grown so much as an individual, just flying over to Scotland by myself, like figuring out a visa, figuring out a bank account, figuring out like an entire new culture and a very new academic system. And I think like that really just sort of, in terms of personal growth, I couldn't have thought of like a more, I don't even know how to describe it, where it's just like, it is so like in your face that like you have to like adapt and you have to like learn how to grow up like really quickly. And then like when I got to the other side of that, I was like, wow, like I'm so glad I did that experience and I was able to, live internationally for a year by myself. And it really just gave me a lot of confidence that I maybe didn't have going to college. And so that's what I loved really about the program, is that, yeah, you can study abroad. Yeah, you can, take a vacation to Europe, but like there's very few times in your life where you can really live in the culture and experience it and have friends in that culture and really just challenge yourself and grow. And so that's what I really think the program allowed me to do.
I think there is very little else offered that is like this program. And I think that means that everything John just said, all of the benefits of it are very unique. And it also comes with very unique challenges, because growing up and adapting is hard. And I remember times where I sat in my dorm room and I was like, I don't want to be this independent, And so I think that when you are making your decision, you really do have to sit down and ask yourself, what do I want out of a college experience? Because I certainly do not regret the program at all. And I love looking back and seeing how much I have grown, how much I've learned in the program. At the same time, one of the things I'll always regret is that I wasn't able to play lacrosse at a collegiate level, because that's one of the things that was really important to me 4 years ago. It's something that's still important to me now, but the benefits of the program outweighed that. And so you just have to think about things that, what are you looking for in your college experience? Are you looking to be really involved in a single, group of people, single team across 4 years? Are you looking to have a classic study abroad experience, an immersive, language experience or something like that? And then just ask yourself, do I want to come out of this as kind of a different person? I think a better person for sure. But there's a lot more to the program than just the academics and social. The program is about personal growth.
And there's going to be like cost of the program. It's not all like, this is amazing. There are times when you are like, I know for me, like coming into sophomore year when I was like transitioning to William & Mary, there was a time where I was like, did I just make like a massive mistake? Because it's not an easy transition. Like you just became friends with everybody at St. Andrews. Like you love these people. For me, I had a girlfriend in St. Andrews, and then obviously that relationship didn't last. But it was just like there are things that you have to like balance out. Yes, I look at it now and I think of all these benefits, but like there were tough times, and I think you need to be realistic about like it is going to be like a little bit of a difficult transition, and there are stresses that come with being a part of the program. And for me, the benefits just sort of outweigh those costs. And I feel like Aubrey was talking about how like there's very unique problems with the program, And I feel like the reason I'm friends with so many program people is because we all have like very similar problems. And just so like when you're going through orientation at William and Mary, and like you're sort of a little bit separate from the rest of William and Mary student body just because you have sort of different requirements and different problems that you're dealing with. It really is one of these things where I was able to like have these great friendships just because we were all sort of dealing with the same issues at the same time. And so I really have really strong friendships in the program because of that.
No, that's all very helpful information. And actually, you did mention those challenges of that transition. And that is a big worry among students and families of these admitted students is that challenging transition from school to school and then back from school to school. And can you both speak a little more about that challenge and how you navigated that and navigated that transition twice, basically?
So the freshman to sophomore transition, I think everybody would say is the hardest. Like the senior year of college, the freshman year of college is like everybody is like excited. It's like for me, it wasn't like it was a difficult transition logistically because I was in Scotland, but it wasn't a difficult transition in terms of like friendships and like our commitments. Whereas when you're going from freshman to sophomore year, you're sort of hitting a reset when you didn't really want to hit a reset. And so for me, I definitely think the people that get the most of the program are the people that come in with a very optimistic sort of mindset and are like, this is what it is. Like, I'm just going to try to make the most out of this experience. And then they grow to love that experience. And so I definitely try to adopt that mindset. And for me, like joining the rowing club was such a helpful part of my transition because it gave me something to do for literally like 15 to 20 hours a week, where it was like, I have these friendships that are part of rowing and I'm also just like actively doing something. Whereas, you know, I had friends who didn't make it all 4 years of the program. And I felt like they didn't give their second school like the chance, where they were sort of angst about it, where they're like, oh, I miss my friends and I miss the clubs that I was in and I miss, you know, it's just sort of those sorts of things. And then when they get to their school, they don't get a chance. And so everybody who makes it all 4 years really like loves the program because they gave it a chance and they really realized there were things about both universities that they really grew to like.
I would definitely agree with John that the transition between your freshman and your sophomore year is the most challenging of the program. And I'll go back to that one, but I do want to talk a little bit about the transition, at least for me, coming back to William and Mary from St. Andrews as well, just because, yeah, I think everyone had prepared me for the difficulties of the first transition, but I had never even thought coming back would be hard. And so I think that's something that hit me a little bit with surprise. The transition for me coming back to William and Mary was most frustrating academically. Socially, it was mostly okay. Like I had said, I had been anxious about coming back socially, but the second I got back, I realized that there was really nothing to have been worried about. But academically, it was frustrating for me, and I think for most economics students in the program, to return to William and Mary economics after being at St. Andrews, just because the way that econ is taught at St. Andrews is at a very, very high level. You're only taking 3 classes at a time, and so those classes and those subjects you're learning about, you were really learning about those, you know. And so I think that was really stimulating for me. And so to come back to William and Mary, I found a lot of the things I was learning in my classes were things I had already learned at St. Andrews. And that is a pretty common experience as far as economics goes in the program. So I do want to make you guys aware of that. Okay, back to the navigating the transition for me from freshman to sophomore year, going from William and Mary to St. Andrews. I considered dropping the program every single day for the first semester that I was at St. Andrews. And I think the transition is hard, but you can make it harder than it needs to be in your head. And so that's my advice to you. Because what eventually got me to love St. Andrews and to really find meaningful friendships there was that I came back second semester and I said, okay, Aubrey, you feel like you don't fit in here. You feel like you don't have friends here. Let's just fake it till you make it. These people that you've been hanging out with in your different societies, instead of considering them people who you've been hanging out with, consider them, your friends, and treat them like they're your friends, and just change your mindset. That's really all it was for me, is that in my own head, I had been making myself feel like an outcast, when really I had so many people that like loved me and that I loved at St. Andrews, and I didn't realize it until it was just a little like switch that I flipped. And so that's the advice I'd give socially. Academically, that is just kind of a lot of work you're going to have to put in to talk to your professors and try to make sure you understand what their expectations are at the different universities. And that's why we have peer advisors and degree representatives throughout the joint degree program. So you always have an older student who's looking out for you, who can tell you, okay, these are the academic differences. This is how you write an essay at William and Mary. This is how you write an essay at St. Andrews. And so you have access to those resources for the academic transition.
The academic transition definitely isn't, I don't think of it as much as the social transition, but it is there, where like William and Mary has a very different course load than St. Andrews. Because like, as Aubrey was saying, at St. Andrews, you normally take 3 classes a semester, and those classes are pretty in depth, where it's like, you're going way deeper than any econ class you will at William and Mary. And so I felt like there's advantages to that, in that you don't have a ton of, like, there's not a lot of homework or quizzes or midterms like you might have at William and Mary, but there is a final exam that's going to be 50 to 75% of your grade. That like, it's just sort of how they weight test and how they approach assignments. Whereas at William and Mary, like I have a homework assignment due at 8 p.m. tonight for a class. And it's just sort of like, I have 2 essays next week. And there's sort of this continuous workflow that is not part of St. Andrews. So I find that transition always a bit difficult, where I have to sort of like readjust. And I'm like, oh, I have like an essay to write every week at William and Mary. And then when I'm at St. Andrews, it's, well, like I have nothing for the next like 4 weeks, but I know that this final is going to be like 75% of my grade. So I should probably get on top of those readings. And so it's just sort of like navigate. You have more flexibility at St. Andrews, but I feel like I'm more on top of my work at William and Mary, is sort of like the balance.
That makes sense. Does anybody tuning in have any questions? If you do, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box. If not, I did put my email next to my name here in case you have any questions that and you'd like to reach out. Looks like a question came in. Is the program very competitive? So do you both want to speak? Are you all competitive amongst each other, more collaborative?
I don't know from an admission standpoint really how competitive it is, but no, I don't think we're very competitive. Like, it's really like we're sort of all in this together, at least how I feel like with my friends. Whereas like there's just some questions like, do I need to take a religion class this year? Or there's like sort of like, do I need to write a dissertation? And I feel like there's sometimes those questions where you don't, like, William and Mary has its own requirements for its students, St. Andrews has its own requirements for its students, and the program is sort of like an amalgamation of both those. And so I feel like, at least with my friends in the program, it is a very collaborative, like, do we have to take for me, it's always around classes, where it's like not really knowing if I need to take a class, or especially this year, I didn't know if I need to write a dissertation for econ. You don't if you take a call 400, but like, that's just one of those things where it's like, you only really know if you talk to your friends in the program and your advisor too. But like, mostly you fact check yourself with your friends a lot about like what you need to do and what sort of requirements are.
Yeah, I think as far as the student body goes, and who's in your cohort, and students in the program who aren't in your cohort, but who are a year above you or a year below you, I have never witnessed any sort of competitiveness among them. I think that we're all very much in it together. Everyone who's an older student in the program who's been through it wants to make sure the younger students succeed. Like, every single person wants to make sure that every single person in the JDP is making it through what we all have to make it through. And so it is very collaborative, just socially, academically, when you're confused about classes,
I mean, there's a little competition. Like I wanted to be a peer advisor, but I was going up against Aubrey, and so I did not get the peer advisors. So so there's a little bit of competition, but most of the time it's pretty collaborative.
That's great. And with the question, if the person posing the question was wondering about admission, this program is very unique, and the process you had to go through to be admitted to the program, you first had to be admitted to William & Mary, and then you're reviewed for the joint degree program, and then you can either be admitted to the program, waitlisted, or denied. So it's a competitive program. And so, congratulations for getting into the program. It's super exciting. And as I've all mentioned, it's a really close-knit cohort. And in case anybody's wondering about that community within the program and also after finishing the program, there is a new LinkedIn kind of profile for JDP students to check out with alumni and kind of what's happening. And then there's also the WAMSTA Student Partnership, a Facebook group, and just group that is really there as a resource for students to learn more and stay connected. There's just so much, there's the peer advisors, the major advisors, the academic director on both sides. So you really do have a strong support system that, like Aubrey said, is there to make sure that you succeed and just that you find success in the program. And really, it is a very rewarding program. Yes, it has its challenges for sure, but it's so rewarding. And I think, Marcus Holmes, the academic director on the William & Mary side, he likes to say that it's a challenging program, but it's very rewarding, and it's so true. So definitely thank you both for explaining your experiences, and thank you for being panelists. And thank you to those who tuned in and learned more about the joint degree program, and specifically the econ major within the program. But again, reach out if you have any other questions. We also have our Meet a Major page where you can reach out to a major within the JDP program, or I should say the joint degree program, because that's being programmed twice. So please feel free to reach out if you have questions after today. And congratulations again on being accepted to the program. It's very exciting. Everybody have a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful weekend. Bye.
Bye.